So this week's parsha we learn about one of the precious mitzvahs, Pidyon HaBen. And sometimes you wait very long. In my family, we waited for the first Pidyon HaBen more than 20 years. My oldest is a daughter, and only by my youngest daughter, the first time were we zeicher to a Pidyon HaBen, and Baruch Hashem, since then we had a few einiklech, and Baruch Hashem. So there are many reasons that would not necessitate Pidyon HaBen. So this is a very precious mitzvah. What does Pidyon HaBen mean? In halacha, there are two different concepts of Pidyon. Let me explain. Pidyon Hegdish and Pidyon Maser Sheni. They're not the same. Hegdish could sell possessions if it's Hegdish by the Kabayis. Kiddush is a guf. It cannot be transferred, cannot be sold. There is no Pidyon. But Hegdish Domim, there's Pidyon. People in days of yore were Magdish 1,000 different type of things. Person moved, he bought new furniture, he took his old furniture and he donated it to Hegdish. What is Hegdish supposed to do with furniture? In the Azora, there wasn't a set of sofas because Ein Yeshiva B'Azora. So Hegdish is also like any other business. They sell stuff. And the money goes to Hegdish. Pidyon Hegdish is a purchase. It's an acquisition. Stuff belongs to Hegdish. Hegdish sells. The money you pay becomes Hegdish. And the objects you buy are Yoitza Mehegdish L'chulin. Maser Sheni, there's a machlokes tanua whether it's a moment gavoya or a moment hediyat. We paskin Maser Sheni is moment hediyat. You know what Maser Sheni is? So Maser Sheni is 10% of the produce of your fields. Is Maser Sheni. Does anybody know? To whom do you give Maser Sheni? To a Kohen or to a Levi? Huh?
You eat it in Yerushalayim.
That's it. You give it to no one. You need to eat it in Yerushalayim. So when you go to Yerushalayim, you eat Maser Sheni. But it'll rot until you go to Yerushalayim. And that is Pidyon Maser Sheni. You say, Hineni Machalal. Kedusha goes from the Peres on to money. You go up to Yerushalayim with money and you buy food in Yerushalayim. If Maser Sheni is a moment hediyat, it cannot be understood as a purchase. The Peres are yours, the money stays yours. So Maser Sheni is a different concept. It is transferring Kedusha from one thing to another, from the Peres to the money. So what is Pidyon HaBen? Is it a purchase? I am buying this child. From whom am I buying it? From the Kohen. Does the child belong to the Kohen? It doesn't belong to the Kohen before the Pidyon, and it doesn't belong to the father after the Pidyon, because a child is not a monetary possession of anyone. Every Jewish child belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and belongs to himself. So Pidyon HaBen cannot be understood as a purchase like Hegdish. Is it like Maser Sheni? But there is no halachic difference in the status, neither of the child nor of the money, before Pidyon, after Pidyon. The Chumash Shlom that we give to a Kohen is not Hegdish. The Kohen could buy whatever he wants with that money, and the child wasn't Kodesh before or after. Seforno, twice in his Perashat Torah, says that a child before Pidyon is Oser Bahanoah because he's Hegdish. So, Oser Le'ishtamish, the child before Pidyon. Well, a 30-year-old baby cannot be very helpful in the house. He can't do the dishes, he can't do the laundry. But sometimes we enjoy little babies. Is it mutter to cuddle a baby before his Pidyon HaBen if he's Oser Bahanoah? So we need to write a tshuva. How do we define Hanoah? Enjoying a little baby, is that Hanoah? So this Seforno has no halachic bearing at all. Because it's a Gemara Mefureshes in Mesechet Bechoros that Bechor Odom is not Oser Bahanoah. Only Bechor Behem is Oser Bahanoah. So what type of a Pidyon is this? It is not similar to Pidyon Hegdish, nor to Pidyon Maser Sheni. But still, The Torah uses the Lashon Pidyon. Kol peta rechem l'chol bosar she'ikrivu l'Shem, ach podoi tifte ez b'chor ha'adam. The Torah speaks about Pidyon, and the Torah also says, Kadesh li kol b'chor. So this Kadesh li kol b'chor is theoretical, because the b'chor is not Kodesh, but still. So, huge machlokes in achronim. Let's start off with source number 3. Eino av yochel livdas al yedei shliach, v'gam ein bezen poiden oisoi b'li ha'av. This is a gewaltige chiddush. You can't do Pidyon HaBen al yedei shliach. Why not? As we see, the Ramo writes, the sources are Rivash. Maybe yes, maybe no. Simakuf Lamed Aleph and Rivash, there's a lengthy discussion written by the shoyal of the Rivash, and we don't really know who that was. And the shoyal writes that you can't do Pidyon HaBen al yedei shliach. And he wants to be mefarish the brocha based on this assumption. The Rivash ignores what the shoyal wrote, and he writes something else. The Ramo understands that if the Rivash doesn't reject what the shoyal wrote, obviously he agreed. The Turazov says, if the Rivash doesn't even mention what the shoyal wrote, obviously he thought it so silly that there's no need to respond. So the Taz says, that's not a Rivash, but the Darkei Moshe brings it from the Rivash. So it's an interesting discussion. How do we understand the fact that a Godel B'Yisrael brings Divrei HaShoyel and he ignores them? Does that mean he agrees? Or does that maybe mean he didn't think it's so important to respond? Why would Shlichus not apply to Pidyon HaBen? Why? Biragra, Tema, Kol Zeu Tema, the Lome Boyali de Shliach de Shlucha Shalodem Kamoisoi, Elo Daf Ache Yochel Livdois Afilo Beloy Dati Shalav, Loi Odaf, Na Ache Yochel Livdois by Masa Sheni, She'einoi Elo Choiv Ba'alma, Koyin Goyve Memishabodim, Vaporeya Choivo Shal Achar, Poreya Choivoy, V'chi HaPoreya Choivo Shal Achar Einoi Nifta Haloiva. Reuven owes the money to Shimon. Levi knows that Reuven is in dire straits and he doesn't have money. And he also knows that Shimon needs the money. So Levi, B'tuv Liboy, goes to Shimon and he says, I want to pay Reuven's debt. I did this many times, people that owe a lot of money to the Makolet, and the Bala Makolet comes to complain. So I say, let me pay what he owes you. So the Goen says, Pidyon HaBen is just Priyas Choiv. You don't even need the father's consent. Anybody could be paid a child that isn't his, because a Poreya Choiv is Shel Chaveiroi. This Goen is dynamite. Theoretically, there could be a situation, person had a Ben Bechor after many years, and he is so full of Hoidoya. And he rented the most expensive hall in town, and he took a very expensive catering, and it took him 30 days to find a Kohen named Rappaport, because some people think that Rappaport are the most Miachosim Kahanim, and I think in our times, all the Kohanim are the same, and there's no difference between Buzaglo and Rappaport. All the Kohanim are the same, and you could do Pidyon HaBen with any Kohen that is Oile Leduchan, and he is so happy, and he has a guy that doesn't like him very much. So a day before the Pidyon HaBen, he goes to a Kohen and he says, here, Kach Lecho Chamish Zloim, and I want Pidyon HaBen for my neighbor's son. And he's the first guest to come in the morning to Pidyon HaBen, and he approaches the father and he says, well, you're going to have a beautiful party, but it's not Pidyon HaBen because I was Poidei your son yesterday. And the father asks him, well, who's the Kohen? He says, I don't need to tell you who the Kohen is. It's not your business. But your son is already Podui. And if you're going to make a brocha, it's a brocha Lavatola. So have a beautiful party, he says, but it's not Pidyon HaBen because it's done. According to the Gro, yes, there could be such a situation, and sounds a bit strange. The Rivash says, let's go back to the Rimo, Ein Bezdin Poidin Oisoi Beloi Hu'av. Nobody can do Pidyon HaBen without the father. And the Gaon says, no, why not? He could. So what is the machlokes between the Gaon and the Shulchan Aruch? Exactly how do we define Pidyon HaBen? According to the Gaon, there's no actually Pidyon because nothing happens. It's matnos kahuna. It's a chayv. You had a ben bechor, you owe money to shevet kahuna. Anybody could pay your debt, just like a parei chayv shel chaveroi. The Ramo and the Rivash, according to the understanding of Ramo, they definitely say, no, there's a Pidyon. It's not only giving money. If it's giving money, you don't need shlichus. When you give tzedakah, does it matter how your money goes to the recipient, to the oraman? What's the difference? It's my money, and he's going to enjoy my money. That's tzedakah. You don't need shlichus. So it's clear that the Ramo says, no, this is a Pidyon. We still need to answer the first question of the Gro. Why don't we say shlichus shelo l'komaisoi? But at least you need shlichus. As every Kenyan, you need shlichus. So we turn the page to Machna Ephraim is exactly the same as the Gro. Hapoida b'noi shel chaveroi imu podui ra'isi lechoyim lechanei v'shekazu kol shopadim zev shelo yischus elo v'zochon yodam shelo b'fonov and schiyim etam shlichus. But the Machna Ephraim says you don't even need shlichus. You don't need shlichus because same. It's just matnas kahuna, and for matnas kahuna you don't need shlichus. Let's go over to source number 7. Tzois HaChoshen. Ru'isi bekuntres mayim chayim alagon ha'macha b'pri chodosh. Sheher the mitter litten l'koyin cotton, pidyon chomesh shloim. Cotton. Because das acheres makna, cotton yesh lo kinyan. Toises and various different sources in Shas says, das acheres makna, even a cotton could be koina. So you could give chamisha shloim to a koyin cotton. But ani ezdati lo shayach b'metonas das acheres makna. So Yisachoshen says, matnas kohuna is already momen hashevet. So the person, when he chooses which kohen to give Trumas Amaisis, he's not in the status of a makna. The money isn't his. The Trumas Amaisis are not his. He just has toivis hanoah. He has the privilege to choose and decide to which kohen he's going to give. So the Chsois argues there is no das acheres makna. And he has a different interpretation. How could you give matnas kohuna to a cotton? But if Pidyon HaBen is an actual Pidyon, you give money to the kohen, and the kohen, as if, gives you the child, then hadra kusha leduchta, a cotton could receive, but he can't sell. So obviously, though the Pri Chodesh and the Tzois HaChoshen learn like the Gro. No. It's all about giving to the kohen. The kohen gives nothing in return. It's just like matnas kohuna. And that's what you could give to a cotton. So as we see, many achronim feel and learn that Pidyon HaBen is just a one side, either priyas choiv or nesinas matona. But the kohen is not really a part of it. I don't think so. Let's see the Rambam, source number 1. HaMitzvah hashmoinim shetzivono livdo izbechor odom ושניתן הדומם ההם לכהן, וביאו לנו הנסינו הזויס איך תהיה, שנבדהו מן הכהן וכאילו כבר זוכה בוי ונקלהו ממנו בחומש שלוים. As if the Kohen was Zoicha, and we buy this child from the Kohen. So the Rambam compares it not to Pidyon Maser Sheni, but rather to Pidyon Hegdish. As if. Of course it's as if, because as I said, this is not a purchase. The child doesn't belong to the Kohen. So it definitely is as if, but as if is the agdor of the mitzvah. Ke'ilu zocha bo hakohen v'niknei hu memenu. Yes, we don't ignore the lashon of the posuk. Tivde, 4 times. Parshas Boy, Parshas Mishpotam, Parshas Tisu, Parshas Korach. The Torah says Tivde. And the Torah also says Kadesh likol b'chor. There is some ruchnias de kehegdish that has no expression in halacha lamaisa. And it's as if a purchase, but that is the geder. Ke'ilu zocha boy hakoyen v'niknehu heimeno. That is actually the mitzvah. Sefer HaChinuch, shemitzvah kol echad miYisrael, sheyivde min hakoyen b'noi shehu b'chor. So the hagdor of the mitzvah is Pidyon, sheyivde min hakoyen. Hagos Mordechai, in Yevamos, Semakuf Chav Zayin, writes, the Nusach, the father says to the Kohen, B'ni ze b'chor shelchohu. So both parties participate in this game. The father says to the Kohen, B'ni ze b'chor shelchohu. The child is yours. And then the Kohen asks him, Ma boyes tvei. I wonder whether it ever happened that in the Pidyon HaBen, and the Kohen asks the father, Ma boyes tvei, and the father thinks for a moment, and he says, I'll tell you the truth, I have 10 kids, not from this wife, because number 11 can't be a b'chor, but it's a second marriage. I already have 10 kids, and I don't have money to pay the mashkanta next week. You know what? Keep him. Take him. Enjoy. Mazel tov, the father says to the Kohen, you have a new baby now. And maybe sometime, if I'm going to be better off, I'll come back to you, we'll negotiate. So, do you think it ever happened? So, when the Kohen asks the father, Ma boyes tvei, well, what does it really mean? As if there's another option? And if a father would dare to say to the Kohen would say, crazy man, take your baby, get lost, give me my 5 shkolim and get lost. There's no such a thing. However, that is exactly the mitzvah of Pidyon HaBen. Ke'ilu zocha bo hakohen v'niknei hoimeno. It is an actual Pidyon. And like the Sefer HaChinuch writes, she mitzvah sheyivde min hakohen ez benoi shehu b'chor. So there's a huge question, which started off more than 700 years ago, up to this very day. What do you do lo yoleinu if there is no father when the 31st day comes? The father passed away either after the child was born or during the pregnancy. But there is no father to do Pidyon HaBen. What do we do? The Ramah, she and Hey and Yoredei Siftas Vav writes, we make a necklace, tas shel zahav, a necklace with a little tas, and on that tas is writes, Einoi podu, and we hang it on the child's neck. He should remember, when he comes bar mitzvah, to do Pidyon HaBen. That is not a very practical eitzah bismanenu. So this young kid will go to cheder with a necklace, and all his friends will laugh at him, and they'll ask him, you're a girl or you're a boy? Why do you come to cheder with a necklace? And he will need to explain, take out his tas, and explain to them, I'm a Yosem, and my father wasn't around, so I need to do Pidyon HaBen. That tas, that necklace won't last 13 years, let us be clear. And the shach on the spot says, that necklace is going to be lost way before the boy becomes bar mitzvah. That's not a practical eitzah. But the source of this halacha is a Maharil, and the Ramo quotes the Maharil. So the opinion of the Maharil and the Ramo, if there is no father, there is no Pidyon HaBen, because it's the father's mitzvah. And if the father isn't around, there is no mitzvah Pidyon HaBen. Only when the child will become bar mitzvah, then he will have the mitzvah of Pidyon HaBen. And the Shach and the Taz quote Seder Derech, and they quote that the Maral Meprag disagreed, and the Maral Meprag said, Beis Din could do the Pidyon, Mitzad Zochon Yodam Shaloi Befonov. And if the father isn't around, we are zoiche for the child. And zochon yodam shelo befonav. So the Shach disagrees with the Ramo, and the Shach says, if there is a grandfather, he has first priority, because b'nei bonim harei kebunim. So if there is a grandfather, we give him the schus. But if there is no grandfather, then Beis can do it. Mitzad zochen la'adam shaloi befonav. So this is an argument starting off with Maharil and the Maharal and Seder Derech and the Shach and the Taz. So I just want to make you aware, all these sources go against the Gra. Because according to the Gra, you don't need zochen la'adam shaloi befonav. Anybody could do Pidyon HaBen, because it's just matnis kohona or priyas chayv. So all these sources disagree with the Gra, and they hold like the Rambam, Ke'ilu zocha boy hakoyen v'niknehu heimenu. There is an actual Pidyon, even though this Pidyon has no halachic effect, because the child wasn't kodesh before, he isn't kodesh later. He didn't belong to the kohen ever, and he doesn't belong to the father after the Pidyon, but still, that is oifen kiyumo shana mitzvah. So as I said, this machlokes is unresolved. 100 years ago, there was a machlokes between the two gedolim in Yerushalayim. Sefer Hadras Kodesh, which is a compilation of Torah of Gedolim Yerushalayim, Siman Chof Ches Chometes. There was a Yosem, and Pidyon HaBen, and Rabbi Zelig Rivim Bengis was one of the Gedolim Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yosef Zatzal was his Talmud. Rabbi Zelig Rivim Bengis paskined that the Beis should do the Pidyon, according to the Shach. Rabbi Hesh Pesach Frank disagreed. And he said, no, if there is no father, we need to wait. Tas shel zov. That's what Rabbi Hesh Pesach. And Rabbi Hesh Pesach Frank argues, even though this machlokes goes back hundreds of years, and all the poskim deal with this question, but Rabbi Hesh Pesach has some new insight, and he says, my son-in-law, Reb Shmuel, showed me the Gra. Do you know which Reb Shmuel I'm talking about? Probably in the yeshiva world, the most famous Reb Shmuel. Who is that? What? Reb Shmuel Rozovsky was the son-in-law of Reb Hesh Pesach Frank. Very moving story. He was a son-in-law of Reb Hesh Pesach, and he got divorced. And when he fell ill with cancer, at a relatively young age, his divorcee asked to marry him again because she wanted to be helpful in that last journey of his life, and they remarried. And she remarried knowing that he is terminally ill, and she wanted to have the schus of being with him before his demise, and that's what actually happened. So Rabbi Pesach Frank writes, my son-in-law at the time was a younger man, but ultimately was the greatest Rosh Hashiva of his era, showed me the Gra. But the Pesach Frank says, even if it's just Priyas Choiv, but if there is no father, there is no Choiv. And there is no Choiv, not Shaykh Priyas Choiv. So the Pidyon would have no effect, because even according to the Gra, that it's Priyas Choiv Ba'alma, who's the Bal Choiv? If there is no father, there is no Choiv. And if it's Matnas Kohona, who is the one that is supposed to give Matnas Kohona? The father is not alive. Kivin Shemei Sodom Chav Shimon Mitzvas. So the Pesach Frank writes, there's no way to do Pidyon HaBen. For Yosem, you need to wait till he grows up, and he's 13 years old. Rabbi Yehuda Asad, who was Rabbi Yehuda Asad? Anybody know? Was he a Rishon or an Achron? Well, judging by the name, probably he was an Achron. He was a contemporary of the Chassam Sofer, Talmud of Rabbi Mordechai Bennett. Rabbi Yehuda Asad Siman Reish Samach Vav has an interesting argument. And he says, a Yosem needs to do Pidyon HaBen when he's a Giya L'chinuch. A Giya L'chinuch is Chayav b'Mitzvas. He can't give money, but he Giya L'oines HaPu'utois, that's a year before his Bar Mitzvah, Mikchoy Mekach Mem Korei Mekach. So he needs to do Pidyon HaBen on his own before his Bar Mitzvah, Mitzad Chinuch. It's an interesting argument. The very first gadol to make this argument is the Zichron Yosef. So I'm introducing you to names you might not know. The Zichron Yosef was Rabbi Yosef Steinhardt. He was a contemporary of the Noida B'Yehuda, and the Yoreh Deis Machavav, he asked this question. Why do the poskim say that if a child is an orphan, we wait for his bar mitzvah, and why not Igia L'Chinuch? So the Zichron Yosef says, well, many of the Achronim deal with the question, why did Avraham Avinu wait with Mitzvahs Milah till HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him, Ki em Avraham Avinu kol haTorah kula sheloi nitno? So why was Milah excluded? In Minchas Osher, there's a huge discussion about this. But many Achronim say, Avraham Avinu wanted to be Makayim this mitzvah, Kemisha Mitzvah V'oise, Ki Godla Mitzvah V'oise, Memisha Eina Mitzvah V'oise. So unlike davening and Kriya Shema and learning Torah, which you could do every day, Milah you could only do once in your lifetime, so it's preferable to wait. And the Zichron Yosef says, Pidyon HaBen you could only do once in your lifetime, so it's better to wait for a bar mitzvah and you're a bar chiyuv d'oraisa and not perform it as a kotten mitzad mitzvahs chinuch. So this is an interesting discussion. And halacha l'maaseh, there is one factor which the Achronim weren't aware of, and it's a very important factor, and it's the Zohar. Zohar Pashas Bereshis, Daf Yud Ches, the Zohar says that a child, time has come to do Pidyon HaBen, and Pidyon HaBen was not done, his life is in danger. And therefore, that's a factor. We do everything we can to do Pidyon as soon as possible and not wait for 13 years, according to the Zohar, that the child's life is in jeopardy. So therefore, I think we should do Pidyon without a bracha, relying on those that say we could do Pidyon, and that's the opinion of the Maral Maplag and the Shach. And even though many poskim say you can't do Pidyon until the child grows up, but why would you take a chance? So do Pidyon immediately, and it's a suffix, so you can't do a bracha. And then when the child will grow up, you need to remember, he should do Pidyon again, and once again without a bracha. Because if the first Pidyon was valid, then the second Pidyon is a suffix, and suffix brachas lahakel. One option would be, don't do Pidyon, and then the child will do the Pidyon when he grows up with a bracha. But we're taking a chance. According to the Zohar, his life is in danger. And therefore, I think what should be done is a double Pidyon. And there's some Sofer not aware of the Zohar, on his own says we should do twice. Number one, Alidei Beis Din, without a bracha, because it's a machlokes, the Taz and the Shach and the Maral and the Maral. And when the child grows up, we do it again, just to know that the Pidyon is valid according to all the different opinions. So I said before, the Kohen asked the father, Ma boyist fei, as if there's an option. The Panav Zerov was a Kohen. And as you could all imagine, he was a very sought-after Kohen. And who wouldn't want the Panav Zerov to be the Kohen officiating at his Pidyon HaBen? And the Panav Zerov, by every Pidyon HaBen, when he needed to speak, he had the same drasha. And he said, what does it mean when the Kohen asks the father, Ma boyist fei, the child or your money? The Panav Zerov said, B'derech Musar, hello, sir. You're a father, you're a dad. Start thinking seriously about life. What's important to you, your children or your money? Now is the time you need to decide. You have a baby boy. So raising a child to Talmud Torah costs money. You should know that. So it's about time to start thinking seriously about life. Ma boyis vei, what's more important to you, your children or your money? So that was the Panav Zerov's pshat in this interesting question that the Kohen asked the father, Ma boyis vei. So I hope you all understand that's not really pshat, but powerful word, b'derech musar, ma boyis vei. So I think that is a question people should ask themselves, whether they have Pidyon HaBen or not, whether you have a boy or a girl. But But this question, Ma Boyes Tvei, is a very important question that we should ask ourselves many times throughout life. And sometimes it is a very, very relevant question. Your priorities in life. What are your priorities? What is the most important to you? Is it passing on the torch to the next generation, which is the greatest chiyuv any person ever has? Many times I said, Ki yodativ lemana sheyetzaves bona vebeisa yachla v'sham l'derech Hashem. Rashi writes, Ki yodativ is a loshan chibo. Kodesh Baruch Hu says, I love Avraham. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu has many reasons to love Avraham, many reasons. He was the first human being to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu on his own. Well, Adam HaRishon had no other options. Yitzia Kapav Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he was there. Noach was a tzaddik, but Noach wasn't Jewish. Avraham Avinu was the first to discover Elokei Yisrael. And that is the reason for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to love Avraham. Maybe he was the biggest Marbitz Torah in history because the Rambam writes in the very first Perek of Hilchas Avodas Kechavim, describing the world before Avraham Avinu, or were Ovdei Elilim, Ad Sha'omad Eisan Zeh, V'nikbetzu Elav Alofim V'Ravavois, V'Shatal B'Libam Et Ikar HaGadol Shel Amunas HaYuchad. The Rambam writes, he had tens of thousands of Talmidim flocked to him. Another reason to love Avraham. Asura Nisyonis Nisnas Avraham Avinu V'Yomed B'Kolam. He was tested 10 times by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he passed the test. Kiyam Avraham Avinu Kol HaTorah Kula Ad Shelo Nitno. But the reason HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves Avraham is none of these reasons. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu love Avraham? Ki yodatem lemana sheyetzav es bona vebeisa yachla v'sham l'derech Hashem. Teaching your children, Torah Nir Shamayim. Passing on the torch we all received by Har Sinai to the next generation. That is the biggest obligation every Eid has. So the Panav Zerav says, you have a baby boy, decide what's important to you. Ma Boyes Tvei, is it your children or your money? And money is a means. Money is a means to be mechanech your children on a Talmud Torah and to do other mitzvahs. So this is a very important message. And the Pidyon HaBen is Kadosh li kol bachor. So in days of Yor the B'chorim, did avodas hamikdash. And the HaShulchan explains in Siman Shin Hey that essentially every bachor should be like a Kohen or a Levi, and he should be mukdash l'Kadosh Baruch Hu. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, no, that is not the proper way, but that is the concept of Pidyon HaBen. So even though this Pidyon doesn't really have any direct halachic effect, but as I quoted the Rambam and other sources, yes, there is an element of Pidyon. Have a beautiful Shabbos.